Bet horse racing on DRF Bets. We'll match your first deposit of $200. Get free expert picks and past performances, plus weekly cash back. All from DailyRacingForm, the most trusted name in horse racing.
Hey everybody, it's Marcus Hersh from the Daily Racing Form in Lexington, Kentucky, joined by my esteemed colleague, Steve Andersen, an international racing expert. We're here to talk to you about the International Contenders in the Breeders' Cup races on Friday and Saturday. Steve, you ready to roll?
I'm ready to roll. This is a fascinating Breeders' Cup, and it's got some really remarkable foreign horses in it. I'm kind of curious to see how some of them can do. And I think a few of them have their hands full with some USA prospects that might be equally as promising. So it should be a fun couple of days.
Probably. Let's start with the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf Sprint, a race that international horses have never won, though they have come in droves. They did get a second last year with Go Bears Go. Steve, we have a number of European horses here for this race. Do you give any of them a chance?
I think a little bit of one. I would say that I know Speedboat Beach looks very good, but the horse that interests me is the one that I think interests a lot of people. That's the Platinum Queen, the filly that beat older horses. Remarkable to see a 2-year-old beating older horses in the Group 1 Prix de la Baie at 5 furlong straightaway at Longchamp back on October 2nd. That was that filly's first stakes win. She really is a sharp runner who can be really near the front and looks to be very effective in this field. The problem is she's drawn in post 12. That's a tough draw for the distance. And I worry that she's going to have to be extremely quick to get out there in front of a horse such as Speedboat Beach, trained by Bob Baffert. That discourages me a little bit about the Platinum Queen, but I wonder if she can get out there a little forward leg. Can she win? I think if her best chance, I think, is going to be close in the opening quarter mile, maybe not necessarily on the lead, but not too far off of it as well.
All right. Well, I'm fading the Platinum Queen. I think she's going to be overbet, and I think there's too much pace in the race for her. However, I am predicting a first European victory in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf Sprint in the form of number 5, Mischief Magic. His trainer, Charlie Appleby, is 6 for 11 wins in Breeders' Cup races. That's off the charts. This horse has actually run around a turn on an all-weather track at Kempton. He handled it well. He's a closer in a pace-filled field, and I kind of like his chances.
Drawn pretty well too, isn't he, in post 5 for that style of running?
Yes. I guess the question a lot of people have is he's only gone 6 furlongs. He's never raced 5. Is the 5.5 going to be too short for him? But I think he can. I think with the right setup, he can get there. All right, let's move forward. We got the another race in which the European horses have actually not had a lot of success. I believe it's been since 2013 or 2012 that European horses won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies Turf, and they've only had 2 winners in the race's history, which I believe spans 14 years. There are several European horses entered here. I guess the most noteworthy of which, as far as a level of accomplishment, would be Meditate for Aidan O'Brien. She's achieved the highest ratings in her overseas races, twice Group 1 placed. Steve, do you like Meditate or any other European in this race?
No, I'm against Meditate. Remarkably, Aidan O'Brien has never won this race, and he has had runners virtually every year that it's been run. Never, ever. And this one was a nice filly in the summertime. Let's remember she won the Albany Stakes at Royal Ascot and won the Debutante at the Curragh. But she's been beaten in Group 1 races in Ireland and Newmarket in her last few starts. Never been a mile. And, full marks to Ryan Moore. He'll have her in a position he can do from post 10. But of the European runners, Midnight Mile is probably the one that I would nominate first. Unbeaten in 2 starts for trainer Richard Fahey. She won the 7 furlong Group 3 Oh So Sharp Stakes at Newmarket last month. And as we often talk about on these programs, please respect a 7 furlong race at Newmarket as almost like being a mile, because that's a pretty good uphill finish. And I think that bodes well for Midnight Mile. Post 12, not so much. That's a tough draw in a big field. Wayne Lorden's going to have her well placed, not too wide, and maybe covered up, but again, in a good spot where she can work her way through traffic as that race unfolds. I think it's going to go against the Europeans again this year. I really, really like Pleasant Passage of Shug McGahee. He's the Miss Grower winner. But I do think of the Europeans, Midnight Mile. Is that bad?
That's two of us on Pleasant Passage. I made it my best bet on the day.
That's going to be a very good resource.
I believe Midnight Mile is a credible threat, and if in the Oh So Sharp, she didn't just win; she had to overcome like a lot of traffic, weaving in and out of horses, in only her second start. She's going to be back, and I think the pace is going to be solid, so she's going to have a chance. I will nominate one other horse that I'm very interested in. Number 7, Spirit Gal, who's 20-1 on the morning line. Her trainer, Willie Brown, mainly is a horse trader, buying and selling horses. He keeps 2 or 3 in training every year. This one is a homebred owned by Charles Whitby, a Canadian of some note in the racing world. And she hasn't run in any of the big races. She's never run in a group stakes race. But I watched her races, and I've been impressed with her development through the summer. She's got a lot of speed, but she's learned to settle. She won around a turn last time at Dundalk, and the horse she beat, Cairo, beat him handily. He was initially intended for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf and came back to win a pretty decent Group 3 in Ireland. The problem is she might face serious pace pressure from another European in Manhattan Jungle. That's why I didn't pick her on top, but I do expect her to outrun her odds. Okay, we're going to go to the last race on Friday's card, which is another turf race. And this one, Europeans have had plenty of success in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf. However, there are but 2 overseas runners in this year's renewal. Steve, can Victoria Road or Silver Knot win this race?
Yes, they can. They can win this race. Victoria Road.
Will they win this race?
Maybe. I'll go with you there. Victoria Road, trained by Aidan O'Brien, drew the inside. That's a tough draw, equal to being on the outside. Sometimes tough on the inside. You got to try to figure out a way to get through all those horses. He's a horse who has set the pace, and even that's a big ask, because if he's gone off to the front, he might have to spend some energy to get there. Worth noting that he is the last horse to beat the lovely 2-year-old French filly Blue Rose Sin, doing so in a minor stake at Deauville at a mile. He won at a mile and an eighth already at Chantilly in September. So stamina shouldn't be an issue. My concern, he's going to have to go too far, too quick, too soon. Silver Knot, trained by Charlie Appleby, who you mentioned a moment ago, won the Autumn Stakes Group 3 at Newmarket at a mile on October 8th. Good form here. 3 for 5 in his career. Didn't do too well on the soft turf at Doncaster, but he'll get closer to firmer turf that I think will work for him. This stable won the race controversially last year with Modern Games. That's an excellent chance to do so again in this field. But I am picking Paxil Wallop, the Californian, who I think is slightly underrated, and I think will be the sort of horse who could make a really good stretch move. But he may not be good enough to catch Silver Knot. I think it's going to come down to those 2 are going to be 2 of the leading runners in the field.
I share your appraisal of Paxil Wallop as an underrated horse. I think he's the best 2-year-old coming out of California races that I've seen in the juvenile turfs when I've been looking at it. However, I did pick the 2 Europeans, first and second in this race. Silver Knot has run against some of the best 2-year-olds in England. Chaldean won the Dewhurst. It's a major race at Newmarket. And Epictetus, whom he narrowly beat in the autumn, and Holloway Boy, who was third with trouble in the autumn, they came back to run 2-3 in the Verdum Futurity, straight course mile at Doncaster. So this horse has very good form. He's also gone around a turn twice and did it adeptly. I think he's going to be very tough to beat. I do credit Victoria Road. He's a horse that's bred completely to sprint, but it wasn't until he was stretched out that he started showing the kind of form that will give him a chance here. I know that the race was not of any great account, the Prix de Conde, but I was impressed with the way he finished from far back there. He does have more speed than that. He could be handy from the rail. I narrowly gave it to those 2 over Paxil Wallop, and the winner is. That's Friday. We've given you several winners there already. And we'll move on to Saturday, to the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. This one for older horses. The only winner of the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint to come from overseas came at this very course, Keeneland in 2020, with glass slippers. There are several runners this year, and one particularly formidable one in Highfield Princess. Steve, are you on the Highfield Princess train, or do you fancy any of the other Europeans?
Well, I'm not against Highfield Princess. I just found other horses to pick. I guess it's kind of a strange answer for you. And one of those is Creative Force, who drew the rail for Appleby Godolphin. This guy has was a good 3-year-old last year, ending the season with a win in the British Champion Stakes. He's winless in 4 starts this year, but I give him, of the Europeans, he's the one that I kind of prefer the most. I think he'll appreciate this good to firm ground. He was only a neck away from winning one of the biggest sprints of the year in the Platinum Jubilee at Royal Ascot back in June, and has been 4th and 3rd in 2 top class races since then. So I give him a chance. Actually, speaking of Europeans, the former European Brand, now trained in California by John Sadler, is my actual selection. Regarding Highfield Princess, I think it's got a wonderful chance to win this race. It's going to have to be out there in a good position all the way around. Won his last 3, including taking his racetrack with him, as so to speak, winning in France, England, and Ireland. So there's no real issue there. And I think the good to firm will work for him. The firmer turf will work for him than what he's faced in Europe. So yeah, Highfield Princess, I can respect the mare, but I just didn't pick her.
I did pick her. I like her a lot. She's just been fabulous in her recent races. I don't know what went wrong really in the Platinum Jubilee, where she was kind of a little off form the only time this year. She's just turned into a tiger. She has a lot of speed, but she's also shown she can finish off of a strong pace. I think she's the one that's going to ratchet up the pressure on front-running favorite Golden Pal, and I think that she beats him. But I do agree with your assessment of the rail-drawn horse for Godolphin. Creative Force, my concern was he might not, I don't know if he's going to have quite enough pace to keep up, and I'm worried that he's going to get shuffled back and get in a lot of trouble at going 5.5 furlongs. If he can break and secure a decent position, he definitely has the quality to make an impact. And we shall move on to a race where the Europeans, I believe, ought to have a major impact. The Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf, a very, very good group, I believe, of fillies and mares that have come over for this 1 3/16 mile race. Steve, are you Euroing in this race, or are you Chad Browning?
I'm Euro. I really think Nashua's got a huge chance to win her 3rd Group 1 Grade 1 of the year. She won the French Oaks with Prix de Diane back at Chantilly in June, followed up in the Nassau against older fillies and mares, and was very nearly the winner of the Prix de l'Opera on soft turf. She goes on all sorts of ground. Holly Doyle knows the mare filly really well, and I don't see any reason why she can't win. She's a handy filly. She doesn't have to be in one position or another. She drew post 3. Well, there's a heck of a lot to like about Nashua, the way she's gone through her second half of the 2022 season. I give her full marks. Of the others, I also like Above the Curve a little bit. That's Joseph O'Brien's horse that was 3rd in the Prix de l'Opera, but beaten a nose by Nashua. And I thought she ran very well in that race, which was her first Group 1 race against older fillies and mares. That's an American Pharaoh Kentucky bred filly who won a Group 1 race in Paris at 1.25 miles back in May. So the full credentials to that filly. Interesting to see Velasquez on that one. But her previous jockey, Ryan Moore, is booked to ride Tuesday for Aidan O'Brien, Joseph O'Brien's father. And I'm not as keen on her as I am on the other 2 that I mentioned, but I do think that Tuesday has a chance to finish in the top 3. This is, a horse that was 6th in the Prix de l'Opera at 1.25 miles on soft turf and faded right at the end of the race. Otherwise, she might have been in the first 3 or 4. So it's too hard to be critical of that, considering the turf. And I think she's going to be just fine on this better turf. She did win a little race called the English Oaks back in June. So stamina is not an issue in her capacity.
Yes. I quite fancy Tuesday here, actually. Although I do believe that Nashua is a deserving favorite. I'm looking for a repeat of the 2015 Breeders' Cup Turf here at Keeneland, where John Gosden brought over the big favorite Golden Horn and was defeated by the Aidan O'Brien trained filly Found. I can understand people's reservations about Tuesday, but I don't think she was suited to either of her last 2 races. I don't think she can go very well on that kind of ground. She had a wide draw and was stuck wide without cover in the Prix de l'Opera. But more than anything, I just have a strong sense that Aidan O'Brien who has had good Breeders' Cups here at Keeneland, has pointed this filly to this race for quite some time. It looks like she might be a 1.5 mile horse, but if you go back and see her races in the 1 mile English 1,000 guineas and 1 mile Irish 1,000 guineas, she shows plenty of pace there. I think she has the speed to quicken and win at this trip. Her second in the Yorkshire Oaks to subsequent Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe winner Alpinista was an excellent race. And at Epsom, which granted is a quirky track that's not for everyone, but she was much better than Nashua at that point. Nashua may have caught up to her by now, but yeah, I like Tuesday a lot. I think an Italian-American horse is going to run well, but if Nashua, a big chance. My concern with above the curve, especially after seeing her in person, it's what I thought on paper is she's like kind of a scopier, rounder horse. I think she's the one that may be more of a 1.25 mile horse. I know she won the 1.25 mile Prix St. Ellery. Place du Carousel came back and won the Prix de l'Opera, but she wasn't the same horse then than she became in the fall. If it were to rain, I do think that softer turf suits above the curve, and I would move her up should that be the case. Anyway, I do think that the European horses are going to play a key role in the filly and mare turf, and I'm also pretty sure they will play a key role in the Breeders' Cup Mile. A couple very excellent, a good contingent generally, and in Modern Games and Kinross, two I think excellent milers. Well, Kinross is more of a 6 to 7 furlong horse overseas, but his connections seem to believe that he can get a mile in America. And not to be forgotten is the 2020 mile winner, Order of Australia. Steve, have at it.
Well, the one interesting thing about that 2020 Breeders' Cup was there was a lot of upsets. And we're not talking 6, 8 to 1 shots. We're talking 20, 30, and 40 to 1 shots that knocked the tote board over. And
70
a lot of people
in this case.
Yeah. This particular field, I think, is open. And while I respect Ken Ross, I agree with you about the distance situation because it's a little bit new. But the one that's had no issue with the distance and I think is on the peak form of her career is number 3, Dream Loper. She's 6 to 1 on the line. Dream Loper won the Prix Moulin de Longchamp against males, beat Order of Australia by 5.5 lengths on September 4th. That's an 8-week gap now coming up to this race. So I think that horse can be very effective, very close to the front, not necessarily on the lead, but pretty handy for Kieran Schumark. And for the jockey now, that race was the mare's third stakes win of the year and second Group 1 of the year, second against males. So that's not an issue. Really, it just comes down to the trip. And I think if Dream Loper can be handy for Schumark early in the race, he has every chance to win what I think is a tough group. I like Kinross a little bit, but I also respect Modern Games. I've almost picked Modern Games, but I was discouraged that he got beat a few weeks ago at Ascot, even though he won the Woodbine Mile as well as you could ask a horse to do. He won at Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf last year at Del Mar. So coming to the United States coming to North America, I should say, is no issue at all. The mile's perfect. He won the French 2,000 guineas. Lots to like about Modern Games. It looks like he'll be handy. If you're doing a pick 3 or any sort of bet, multi-race bet, you have to include him, I feel. And I think Modern Games is one that looks very, very logical. But I'm going to take a chance with Dream Loper at a slightly higher price.
Yeah, I think it's going to be more than slightly higher. I think Modern Games is going to be hammered in the wagering, and I think you'll get more than 6 to 1 on Dream Loper. From a value perspective, I think it's going to be there if you believe in that race. I am not quite sold because I don't see her form, to me, overall being quite good enough outside of that race, which I thought was a strangely run affair. Corcoro Rebus went bad in mid-stretch right next to Order of Australia. I'm skeptical, but I could see it, and right. I think you're getting great value there, Steve. But I can't get past Modern Games. You say you were disappointed with his loss. I actually looked at it as a positive because he's not a soft ground horse, and it says good to soft in the course designation. You can ignore that. It was soft to very soft. If you look at the mile time, 1:45 and 2, I mean, that's a slog. This horse is suited to turning races and much firmer going. For him to run that well under those conditions, I think was just it showed that he's continued holding the form he had in the Woodbine Mile. The trainer, Charlie Appleby, swears that race didn't take anything out of him. He is a very hardy horse. He takes his racing well. He has looked amazing training this week at Keeneland. I mean, his Woodbine Mile, I think, wins this race. I think he gets a good setup, and he beats these horses. I mean, I do have a little interest in Order of Australia at a price just because O'Brien made some key points about this race being his target all year, and pretty much every time they ran him, they weren't pushing the horse in any way, trying to save something for the end of the season. They got the prep they wanted over this course last month. He may outrun his odds again. Poor Kinross drew at post 13. Not very many good options for Frankie Dettori. Looking forward to seeing him race, but I don't fancy him in the top 2 really. Okay, the big one, the last of the turf races, the last of the Europeans, the Breeders' Cup Turf. We got Godolphins, we got O'Briens. I think that's it. We have any other Europeans? Oh, of course, Mishriff. Mishriff making his final start with blinkers added for John Gosden. Steve, we had a Godolphin winner for Charlie Appleby last year out in your neck of the woods at Del Mar with Yabir, a 3-year-old. Can 3-year-old Annapolis for the same connections duplicate that feat?
I think Nation's Pride has an excellent chance. It's kind of surprising to see him in this race because in the immediate days after he won the Jockey Club Derby at the Aqueduct meet, the Belmont meet at Aqueduct rather, on September 17th, they indicated that he wouldn't start again this year. Well, that changed over the course of October, and here he is, Nation's Pride. We wouldn't bring him over here if he wasn't good and ready. He's a nice stalking horse who can be very patient for jockey William Buick, who's won on him before in the Saratoga Derby. In fact, this horse is almost an American horse in the sense that he's run 3 times in the United States in his last 3 starts dating back to the early July. So the USA system of racing is really comfortable for Nation's Pride, who is trained in England. I like that horse's chances quite a bit. I actually picked Warlike Goddess, the mare that won the Joe Hersh Turf Classic. I think she's going to get a nice trip just from off the pace. But she has a similar style to Nation's Pride, so wouldn't be surprised if those two are close together all the way through the running. I wanted to pick Rebel's Romance as I watched this race unfold over the course of October. He did win a Group 1 in Germany at 1.5 miles, but he only really beat one horse in that field, and that was the German Derby winner. He did his job that day, but I wonder if there's just maybe a little bit more to find against this class of runners than there was in some of those German Group 1s. I'm going to forgive Mishriff for the 13th place finish in the Arc. Too soft. Remember, this guy won the Shima Classic in 2021 on 1.5 miles on turf, on firm turf, excuse me, in Dubai. Also, another thing about this horse, he was second by a neck in the Eclipse Stakes at Sandown in early July in his first start of the European season. That should be noted as almost a win. He had a dreadful last quarter-mile trip, racing in traffic, and he surged at the finish and very nearly beat a good horse in Vedini. So I think Mishriff has a good chance. A little wide in 11, but going 1.5 miles, ample time for Frankie Dettori to find this guy a good path. I think he has a good chance too. But if you look past the fact that I really like Warlike Goddess, who I think is in the form of a career, Nation's Pride and Mishriff are the 2 Europeans that catch my attention the most.
Yeah, you make a lot of key points about Mishriff, particularly regarding the Shima Classic, where he beat excellent Japanese opposition. He's 1.25 mile horse in Europe, but that race shows that on a flat left-handed track, he can get 1.5 miles. I am worried about the draw. The race there's a pretty short run to the first of 3 turns. 11 is wider than you'd want to be. And the other thing that concerns me about Mishriff is if he's stood in the starting gate when it's opened several times this year, just cost himself any real chance at winning by not getting going right away. He's a 5-year-old who's been going for a while now. Sometimes horses, get a little too thoughtful for their own good. The blinkers on is meant to shake things up with him. I forgive the Arc too. I couldn't quite get there with him. In fact, I just thought it was a slightly subpar group of Europeans, which is why I too ended up on Warlike Goddess. I will say that Rebel's Romance he's quite a physical specimen. I think Charlie Appleby, as trainer, is concerned about him being too big to handle a tight course like Keeneland, but he gets the B jockey James Doyle, but that doesn't mean that he's not capable. I wouldn't be surprised if he ran well. I ended up picking him behind Nation's Pride because they just seem to favor Nation's Pride so much. I don't like the opposition he's beaten in these age-restricted races, and I never thought of him as a horse who was going to win the Breeders' Cup Turf. which is why, I ended up on an American horse. I mean, I guess we'd be remiss, Steve, not to at least mention Broom, who nearly won this race last year at Del Mar and might have won with a slightly more patient ride. He moved early and wide around the turn and then just got nabbed by a veer. He's just so inconsistent. He never breaks well. He didn't finish as well as I would have liked to see in the Sword Dancer. I mean, would you be shocked if he won the race?
Yes, because I really thought that the Sword Dancer was a group of nice horses, and he was only fourth, and he was 3-2, and he had, he came along and ran well and through the stretch.
Yeah, he's supposed to beat those horses. It annoyed me.
Yeah, you're fourth, and you win at Royal Ascot, and you're fourth in the King George, and you come over to Saratoga at the end of August, and maybe it was a warm day, I don't know, but necessarily, Broom, you're supposed to have done the job that day, kid. And he's an in and out horse, and he was like that a little bit last year too. So lovely runner, 6-year-old, almost $2 million in earnings. But I'll look elsewhere in this field.
Okay, all right. Now we're going to sign off momentarily. I set the over/under for myself on European wins at 2.5. Would you take the over or the under?
Well, I'll take the over on that. Yeah, I think there's at least one on Friday and 2 on Saturday. So yeah, I'm going to go in with the overs on that because that's a pretty good bet. I'll take minus 120 on that if I can't get better odds.
I'm not going to take your action because I favor the over too. Okay. I think it's we're going to have a couple of fabulous days racing. Hope the rain holds off so the turf stays decent. It was good today, according to jockeys who galloped over it. Hope it stays good for the big days. Steve, excellent information as always. Thank you for providing our viewers and listeners with so much European insight. And best of luck to everyone at the Breeders' Cup.